So thanks everyone for joining. Today we will slowly start the session. As you can see, we have also our speakers and some members that have always been through our sessions previously join us as well. As more and more people join, we will start off the process, and there will be some also questions along the way that you can share also your part of your personal branding journey. And Marima can give you her insights and advice. And I'm also looking forward to get some tips for myself in this process. So a little bit about Marima. So Marima and I met many years ago, Marima. I think it was 2006, maybe even before. So we have a very long friendship, and I've seen how Marima also has moved different countries, as she has also shared with some in this group. Move different careers, move different life stages, become a parent, and has also very in-depth experience in helping corporates shape their communication strategy, also helping senior executives shape their personal branding strategy. She's worked with a few organizations. We got to know each other through this student organization called ISEC. And she has also then joined various industries such as DHL as well as PepsiCo currently. So I will not introduce her for you, because I think it's always best that she speak and share with you also her own personal relaunch journey and some tips that we can gain from today. So Marima, I will put you then on the Zoom spotlight for this next discussion. Thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me. I am going to try and share my screen, and let's see how successful I am at that. Let me know if you can see it.
Yes, I can see your screen.
Amazing. I work in the communications world. I'm on Zoom calls all the time, as probably many of you are, and got multiple screens, so navigating technology is always a bit of a challenge. I guess the intention of this session, and before I start introducing myself, is to talk about personal brand and how you can essentially have your personal brand and speak about it authentically. The ultimate goal, as this title says, is to have opportunities chase you versus the other way around. And I think I can speak from my experience, but many of you will probably have a different point of view. So throughout the session, if you have any comments or suggestions or ideas or questions, just pop them in the chat. Let's try and have a conversation as well. I love that this is not just a webinar, that it is actually a conversation, and that I can see so many faces. So thank you for joining today. Before I go into the first segment, it would be really good to just get a sense of, what are you trying to get out of this? What is your expectation of this session? Maybe just pop a few words in the chat. Let me see what your thoughts are around personal brand and why this is something that matters to you. Okay, some stuff starting to come through. Interesting. Thank you for sharing. Yeah, where you stand. Perception is reality. Spot on. Brand audience. Amazing. What you can offer. Yeah, start with the value. Love that. How to tell your story. Okay, well, that's kind of my job. That's sort of what I do for a living, and I am incredibly passionate about storytelling and putting stories into context. And just before we go into this, what you just said on chat is incredibly relevant, because what we now know in terms of personal brand is that it is the key to your essentially career success, and it can equally be detrimental to it. So I've seen it go both ways. And when it comes to your personal career, it is really, really important to understand who you are, what is your brand statement? Who do you want to be? Where do you want to go? And these are some of the things that we will talk about today. What's becoming more and more obvious, I think, to employers and employees is that, what our personal brand is essentially seen by so many people. And these are some stats that Forbes has put out around how many people actually screen social media to have a look at potential candidates, to have a look at, future talent pipelines, to have a look at, networking and so on. So I think when you think about your own personal brand and where your career needs to go, these two concepts are tied hand in hand. We've all been through situations where we've either had to apply for jobs or had to hire people, and essentially looking at checking these people out and Googling them and seeing who they are, what they look like, where they come from, what their background is, what they like. And I think in the world of internet, that's something that we can't control, but at the same time we can rein it in and try and own the story of us and our career path that's, I guess, visible to people who are trying to check us out. So why I'm saying that will tell you a little bit just about me and my journey. I come from originally Europe. And the question, where are you from, is probably the most difficult question that anybody can ever ask me. Personally, some people on this call might relate, but for me, home is anywhere we'll kind of set out to go. I'm originally from a country that no longer exists. So I was born in a country called Yugoslavia. Obviously, lots of adversity in that part of the world, have been faced with lots of different challenges in a personal front as a child, built lots of resilience along the way, I think, and it's also shaped me as a person and my personal brand. I lived all over the world. I lived in UK, in Turkey, in Pakistan. I studied university in Bosnia and Herzegovina. I spent 10 years living in Asia, traveling and working in Japan, India, Malaysia, Singapore, subsequently Australia, most recently Europe. Lots of, I guess, nomadic traits, I would say. But as a person, in terms of who I am, I'm a nomad. I love nature. I love books. I'm a bit of a plant parent. I own plants before I actually look at furniture. I'm a huge tree hugger. I love anything to do with nature, anything to do with sustainability. My family and I love camping in the outdoors, and we're big rock climbers. And if I wasn't in the corporate world, I'd probably be into professional rock climbing, which nobody would really believe. And that's who I am. What I do is something that's intrinsically linked, but it's not necessarily, it doesn't necessarily define me. It's part of who I am. And I was incredibly fortunate throughout my career to actually have traveled the world, worked in numerous places. And I define myself as someone who builds human connections through storytelling, preferably over campfire or over coffee. And I was incredibly, I guess, fortunate to have started my career journey with an NGO, and have met so many wonderful people around the world that has sort of crystallized on what I want to do and who I want to be. And early on, I worked for an organization that was very big on leadership development. And as part of leadership development, knowing who you are, what your personal brand is, was kind of incredibly important, but at the same time, it wasn't something that we were talking about back then. There was no internet, we were still sending each other things through fax machines, and then the emails came, and slowly the world started changing. I went into non-corporate banking for a little while, loved my experiences there, but I realized I really wanted to go into corporates. And for me, DHL was a wonderful stepping stone to a very rich corporate career, where I started as an intern in DHL in Singapore, worked for this incredible organization, absolutely the most wonderful experiences. lots of internal networking, one of the largest employers on the planet, such an exciting industry. And for personal reasons, I ended up moving to Australia and joining the largest FMCG organization in the world, PepsiCo. Today, I lead communications function for what we call our Europe sector. So I essentially, as part of my job, do internal communications, external communications, so media, social media, executive communication, and manage things like transformation communication, crisis communications, and other things. If you think about comms, I like to call it the glue of the organization. It is kind of what brings people together. Another thing that really brings people together is people themselves. And we will talk a bit more about this, but one thing that really is important when it comes to organizations and essentially making them more collaborative and agile and human-centric is communication, and comes down to your personal brand, your networking, how you are known, how you're perceived, and so on. So I think just in the spirit of that, when we talk about personal brand, I kind of had 3 crisis moments along my career when I needed to do a very important deep dive and check into who I was and recalibrate myself. The first one was probably when, and the biggest one was when I became a parent. Both times I went on maternity leave for a year and was adamant that I was never going to work and I was going to dedicate my life to being a mother. And it was the most exciting thing I could think of until it wasn't. And I realized that I needed to go back to the workplace and that it was something that was part of me, and working was really important for me. And I needed to understand who I was. So I did an exercise that I will tell you more about to just understand, who I was after all these life changes that had happened to me. Another key moment for me was changing industries. People don't think it's a big deal. There are people who just jump through organizations and change industries very often. For me, it was a really big deal. I was very passionate about a new industry. Fast-moving consumer goods was something that was really exciting, something that I wanted to learn more about. But I essentially needed to kind of reformat myself for that industry and prepare myself for what was to come. And they don't put the F in the fast-moving consumer goods for nothing. It is very fast-paced. And you kind of need to prepare yourself for it, and you need to brand yourself for it as well. So, in a way, selling myself that I was capable and I was competent and I was confident enough to take a role in this industry. The third very important moment in my life, and there've been a lot of these, but most recently, 20 months ago today, actually, it was the move from Australia to Europe. With any move, I think it has a profound impact on people. It's huge. It changes you in a way. But I think when you're preparing yourself for a move, and eventually when you move, you also change. You need to adapt to a new environment. You need to rebrand yourself for the environment that you're entering, whether that's cultural, whether it's maybe you're changing companies and changing locations. And don't get me wrong, there are loads of people that specialize in this and deep dive onto, transitions in life, and coaches around moving abroad, which is incredibly exciting and super valuable. But from a personal brand perspective, it was a moment where I had to kind of deep dive back and redo all these exercises from scratch to make sure that I was still true to my values, I was still true to, who I was, and I was still adding value in the areas that I really want to focus on. Now, just to pivot very quickly, while we're talking about brands, basically every year, Interbrand, which is a large organization, does a top 100 brands analysis, and they put out this value of brands. They can be services, they can be products, and every year I look at this. Obviously, I look at it from a PepsiCo perspective, trying to understand what other companies are there. Interesting, a lot of tech companies are very often the top 10. But I find it fascinating that if you look at any one of these, I can guarantee that everybody on this call, to some extent, knows maybe 50% or more and is familiar with these brands and products and services and so on. These brands have army of people behind them, marketeers, brand folks, commercial people. They get so much support in the back end to become as powerful as they are. We're talking about billions of dollars being invested behind these brands to make sure that they are top of mind, that they are relevant to people, that when you think about a brand, this pops up first, that you are familiar with the logo and so on. I'll take it a step further and say, why don't we do this for us? If you take the exercise of where these brands are coming from, we could essentially use exactly the same playbook for individuals. I was dying to show you this example because every brand kind of has, to me, a purpose and a meaning behind it. So brands, essentially, when you think about a brand, you associate a certain feeling. Just to me, if somebody opens up a chip packet, first of all, my kids come running at me. That's the first instinct because they hear that something's crunching in the background. But it associates, it's associated with happy moments, picnics, birthdays, parties, football matches, where people come together, get a sharing bag, people who are kind of sharing smiles and so on. And to me, brand is spot on. It's way beyond just the logo. It is an experience that you have. And if you look at your personal brand, this is exactly what we should be chasing. So when people think of you, they think of a feeling that you're associated with, the experience that they have with you. And something more tangible is, individuals. I hope most of you know who these people are, but these are some people who are, who have worked very hard on their personal brand and their personal identity. And don't get me wrong, there's an army of people behind them working on their personal brand. But these people we've never met. So it's not like a product that's tangible. You see in a supermarket, you touch it, you open it. These are people that we've never met. We've seen on TV, we've seen online, we've heard their music, we've read their books, but they themselves are a brand. They're not a service, they're not a product, they are themselves a brand. There's something kind of in the middle. And I mean, these are incredible people who have all come from different walks of life. So if you think about it, Michelle Obama branching into a different segment, right? Simon Sinek, incredibly inspiring storyteller. And I think these they all stand for something, and we can always associate values or, what they stand for when we see them. We don't have to, we can think about Ed and know exactly what he does and where he comes from and what his music is like and so on. So think about your own brand, and when you flash up your own image, what is the sensation, the feeling, the experience that you get from that, and what others do at the same time. And this is just a small pool of people. No. And I guess the interesting thing is that these people can go by first names, and they don't even need a full name, right? You think of Madonna and the Williams sisters and Djokovic and Messi, and these are all brands, right?
And Marima, I just want to say that many of our members, through our interactions, find it hard to link a very personal side of us to the corporate identity. And I love how now every time when I have a cup of coffee, I think about you and know that you're someone that we could have a chat with. And that was really, really a genius part of your branding that I feel, even though we've known each other, but even those I'm sure who don't know you in person yet now feel that you're someone that they could approach and can connect with. And so well done there.
Thank you. And I love my coffee. You're right, I travel for coffee. So that's it's the amount of coffee I consume is probably detrimental to my health, to be fair, but I do enjoy it. I'd like to say, well, at least it's not whiskey. So, it's all right.
Guilty pleasures, we're all allowed. We're all humans.
Exactly. A question for you, I guess, for this audience. If you were to brand yourself or to think about your personal brand, what 2 words would you use to describe yourself? I know it's a bit of a kind of odd exercise, and one you put on the spot. It's hard to do, but.
And I like that it's 2 words, Marima, right? We discussed this when we were discussing the session, because it's hard.
It's hard.
It's
hard, yeah. And yeah, it can be adjective and a noun.
Yeah.
Positive change.
Yeah. What is your 2 words, actually?
Mine.
What are your 2 words? Yeah.
Optimistic storyteller.
Oh, wow. That's a nice one. That's a nice one. Clever quiet from Torsten. Huh. Very cool.
I love the book. Oh, Clever quiets are.
Yeah. Anyone else? I'm still struggling to find mine. I think I will get your help there. Priyanka wrote passionate, hardworking.
Passionate, hardworking.
Yeah.
It hasn't come up for me yet.
Yeah, I think you shared it directly.
Well,
no worries. I'm in your on your side. I still need to think about mine.
Oh, we completely get it. It's hard. Maybe park that thought. You can do that exercise afterwards as well. It's a tricky one. So I completely
Absolutely.
Nature lover and optimist. Beautiful.
Yeah.
See, every time I think about change, now I think of Giti.
Yes. Change matters.
Yeah, exactly. Totally, Britta. Yes, nature lovers. So one way to think about your brand, and this is a bit of a shortcut, but I found it really, really helpful, is to think about what you project and who you know you are. And this is kind of the sweet spot of your personal brand, is where these 2 overlap. I had a fantastic conversation with my team yesterday. I'm physically based in Barcelona, and I had my team together for the first time ever since I moved here. And we had a conversation because we are a team of women, and we came together to define our personal brand, and figured out that actually it is an overlap between your perceived self and you as you know yourself. The biggest question was, well, why aren't we talk about authenticity at work, why don't we bring our whole selves to work? Why don't we, why aren't we the same at work as we are at home? And there were some very clear boundaries, which I clearly 100% appreciate. It was fascinating to hear what the overlap is, because sometimes the 2 circles, the sweet spot can be smaller, sometimes it can be larger. It depends on what you feel comfortable with. But I think one really, a few questions to ask yourself when defining your personal brand and when looking at the sweet spot is, where do you want to go? What are your goals? What are you trying to achieve? Like, why is your personal brand important to you? And what are you trying to get out of it? For some, it could be a job promotion. For somebody, it could be just landing a job in a specific industry, like it was for me when I moved into the FMCG world. For others, it could be, just being taken seriously, full stop, and being, sometimes, people struggle in the workplace. Maybe they're in the more junior positions, or maybe they don't have as much experience. It could be just this around building credibility in a certain space. And then thinking about, unique propositions. So we'll deep dive into this a little bit later, but understanding, why are you unique? What is so unique about you? When I did this exercise most recently, moving to Spain, my uniqueness was this international bird's eye view and perspective, where I embrace other cultures. I understand the background of how people operate, the impact of cultures in multi and diverse environments. I'm incredibly sensitive to that. And I think that makes my job easier, but it also makes me unique because not everybody has that kind of worldview. Your unique proposition could be that you are maybe a data scientist, but you look at things with a very different perspective from a business lens. I had a meeting with somebody yesterday who was like that, who is from a STEM industry, but he's all about diversity and leadership. And he said, if I get that right, everything everything else works. And understanding your personal story. I mean, everybody has a personal story. And the best part of it is, I bet you money that if all of you wrote a chapter or a book and put it out there, it would be a bestseller. Because everybody has a very interesting story and a very unique story. And there's something that's unique about you. And there's some incredible storytelling lessons and coaching sessions you can go through to understand what is your story and how do you actually tell it. This is not your elevator pitch. This is storytelling around your personal self. And the other thing is, how memorable are you? What is your iconic signature thing? That could be coffee. That could be, change and transformation. That could be something else. It's different things for different people. But what makes you memorable? Why are you somebody that would stick in somebody else's mind?
Mm-hmm. I just want to also add here, like when our members try and attempt to, put a brand message out on social media, there's always a bit of anxiety, and many tend to be a little too humble. So part of the exercise that we always encourage our members is, put down all the thoughts of what you have achieved so far, off the top of your head, and don't overthink it. And we have to re-emphasize, this is not the time to be humble. Make sure that it is something that you also feel comfortable, but don't be afraid to bring out some of these experiences or even achievements. So what you said really makes sense if we could combine. And when it comes to, for example, how does others see us, I think it's also important to have an understanding about our target market, because branding is, making sure that the opposite party understand, what is the feeling and emotions and experience that we portray. So it's something that I think would be great also to hear from you, Marima, like how do we, if we have different target audiences, for example, how do we then shape that into one nice story that shares about who we really are? So
yeah.
No.
I'm in the same boat with you. And it gets easier over time. And once you get your story right, and I think when you are authentic about things that you're passionate about and can speak to it with conviction, it makes things so much easier. Starting out, especially on social media, is so hard. I mean, we'll talk to in a second. Very quickly, I mean, you've seen the iceberg a million times, but behaviors are kind of what's seen, the perceived you, let's say, how you look and how you behave and what you say and, the gestures that you make. And then everything else is underneath. And that's the stuff that will feed into your personal brand that nobody else can do for you. It's your culture, it's your values, it's your experience, it's everything else. And, that's where the authenticity piece comes in, because the top you can fake, the bottom you can't. And that will forever be part of you. And that's what makes you unique and authentic, right? But speaking of which, this is something that's really close to my heart. And I think you hit the nail on the head when you said, especially on social media, how can we make sure that we lose that fear, I guess, of posting and putting ourselves out there. I think as long as you're authentic to yourself and what you are passionate about, what you're interested in, and what you can speak to, it will come across as authentic. It will be true to you, and I think nobody can take that away from you. I can't talk about the automotive industry. I have no permissibility in that space unless it's about communications. I'm not, big on politics in Latin America. I don't know much about that, so I'm not going to speak about that. But there are topics which are true to me and are authentic to me and my brand. Now, the biggest question I think in the world of comms is what's authentic? I'll give you an example. We do media interviews, and we had one 2 days ago with my boss, actually. And I said, relax and just be authentic. And he stopped, looked at me and said, well, what does that mean? And I said, just be yourself. Just be true to yourself. Don't try to pretend to be somebody else. And he said, well, define authenticity. And I said, well, authenticity is about being consistent. Keep doing the same thing. That builds a brand, right? You need to keep doing exactly the same thing numerous times, and that it will stick true to you. You need to be transparent. You need to be honest, and you need to, people need to know your intentions. You need to be true. You need to be audience centric. In our company, we have this thing what we call consumer centricity. In communications, we translated that into audience centricity. What does my audience want to hear from me? Why should I be talking about this? And in the world of communications in general, and just the image that you put out there, the how you talk to people really matters. And the same is with any communications, right? You're trying to understand, how does the audience want to process that information? Is that something that's interesting to them? Is that something that's relevant? Does it add value? These things are super valuable. The other piece is around storytelling. Authenticity comes through when people tell personal stories. The way to connect with people at the end of the day is to tell your own personal story. Why did in the old ages, the elders sit around the fire and tell the children stories, of historical events and history and other things and values? Because that's how messaging stuck. It was all about storytelling. And the other one is, making sure it's differentiated, because you do not want to be in the same boat with everybody else. If everybody else is talking about artificial intelligence and how great ChatGPT is, do you need to weigh in on the topic? Like, is that something that's really authentic to you? Is that something that you're really interested in? Just because it's trendy doesn't mean, you need to do it. You need to be differentiated.
Mm-hmm. And also, a lot of people in this career transition phase, myself included, think about the question of, meaning, right? So what does it mean for us as a meaningful career? Also, many ask, what impact can I really create, especially at the mid-career point? Who are the people we can help? And how can we then shape that into, an authentic brand? Would be great if you could also share a bit more. But before that, I also want to bring up that I think vulnerability, it's an important part of the brand building, because I don't think people like to see someone that is perfect all the time, without fault. This TED Talk that many people here probably know with Brené Brown is an important one. So it'd be great to hear your insights as well.
Oh, 100%. Mm-hmm. I think the moment somebody's too perfect, we either take them apart and rip their, marketing and so on. You need to be human. At the end of the day, everybody makes mistakes. Everybody does, there's a blip in everything. Nobody's perfect. And life is not scripted. We can't all be scripted, 100% of the time. One thing we also discussed was just around this authenticity, and what's really important for career relaunches is this bridging between your previous narrative and your future narratives. Mm-hmm. And linking your past to your future, which is also linked to this, because we kind of morph through our lives, right? And our brand continuously changes. So one thing that we're faced with often is this imposter syndrome around, we are not perfect. We do not, we do not need to put ourselves out there, or why should we be putting ourselves out there? And why is it important to build a brand, let alone an authentic brand? Why should I even be doing this? And I find that fascinating because, and we spoke about this previously, it's something I faced a lot in my career, and authenticity really helped me and acknowledge that this is something that's happening. This is something that's normal. This is something that happens to everybody, men, women, probably more so women. And it also at certain peaks in your life, like whether it's career, whether it's coming back from, parental leave, whether it's, getting a new job or getting a promotion, you kind of you fake it till you make it in the meantime, right? But this is something that lives with you, and it's very uncomfortable and can be very limiting as well. I think when it comes to your brand, being true about that and being honest about that happening and actually talking about it is part of this, what you were just mentioning, basically being, just being brutally honest that's the reality. It happens to everybody. I think we need to acknowledge that not everything is perfect, not everybody's perfect. And when you look at, brands as in media brands, like large celebrities and so on, these people have proper teams behind them. They are treated like a product brand, essentially. That's not us. We need to be true to ourselves and say that things are not perfect. Do you have a point of view in that?
I think the imposter syndrome definitely is one that all of us face in different stages as we move across countries, as we, become a different person, as we have new curiosities, and where we can be upfront about it, that I don't know, in fact, or when we put out, when we share resources that we support behind, when it comes to how do we want to be seen in our industry, it's also important to inject a balance of how we as individuals don't have all the answers, but these are the ones that, seems to make sense and invite also conversation, because branding is not just a statement. And Marima, I think we also discussed this, that branding is it's a constant evolution, that when we also put ourselves out there when it comes to sharing resources, gathering the tribe of people that, feel similar, getting support from others, then how can we then shape it also and inject it with that part of, I am not sure, but will be great to hear what you think. Yeah.
Oh, totally. And I was actually going to ask the group around, the key roadblocks, like what are the roadblocks? Because we spoke about the imposter syndrome, we spoke about vulnerability, we spoke about insecurities. What does the group think? I'm really curious to see what else is, a key barrier.
So Britta is mentioning trying to be perfect.
Perfection. Yes.
Perfection.
Yeah, perfection.
Yeah, and then
and I think it was beginning of last year. I was for work. I have to. Pop culture is a big thing, so I have to stay on top of what's happening on TikTok, what's happening on Instagram, what's happening on certain lots of different media platforms. And there's a big push from perfect to real.
Mm-hmm.
And you'll see this with like social media filters and the recent brand campaigns, like what Dove did with their body security and so on. Yeah, may I say it out mine aloud?
Yeah, Barbara, please go ahead and share.
May I speak up?
Please.
I'll try to be brief, but it's hard to write this. I'm reminded of a book I read several years ago about introversion. I'm basically an introvert, and this book was really insightful. And the author made the point that for most of human evolution, we lived in very small groups, or relatively small groups, less than something like 500 people. Apparently, there have been studies that show you really can know others when you're in a group of 500 or less. But once society gets bigger than that, people are strangers. And anyway, I don't want to talk too long, but I find this topic fascinating. And if you're basically an introvert, having this public persona is a very modern thing.
Absolutely.
And I don't think humans evolved with that naturally. And it comes a lot faster to some personalities than others. And for those of us who just tend to be more private and quiet, this is my roadblock. I've got to dig that up out of somewhere. And I see other people who seem to do it so naturally, and they're perfectly happy to do it. But I feel like I'm a product of this evolution in a tribe where people would know me for my whole life. And, to me, what you're talking about with branding is simply reputation. And when you live in a smaller group, you have a reputation, and you don't need to come up with a logo and a social media, this and that, and take certain pictures every day. Anyway, that's my little comment about a roadblock.
Yeah, I think we actually spoke about this, Marima, right? Thank you very much, Barbara, for mentioning it, because we all have different personalities, and we also have different fears or perspectives towards social media. And one of the most frequent questions from certain groups, not from everyone, is, do I really need to be on those platforms? Do I really need to be on LinkedIn? Do I really need to be on Facebook? We've got members who decide, and even mentors, not only members, who decide to be totally off it because it got to their mental health, I think, negative point of view, right? Or negative effects from being too much on it. So yeah, Marima, what are your thoughts there?
I think we're probably with the first generation to deal with social media. I think that's one thing that we're still trying to figure it out. And Barbara, I appreciate your comment, and it's spot on. In small environments, you don't need to brand, but your brand is built through experiences and through how people interact with you. And the same is probably with your family members, right? In small groups and so on. Whereas we're talking about building a brand that goes beyond your immediate circle of people, and that can open up future opportunities for you, whether you're looking to, change a career or take a different path, or, just be in a more public space, I guess, which I appreciate. It could be really, really hard for introverts. And I'm raising one. My daughter is an introvert, very, very much. So I'm all about her reading on this, so I can learn from you too. There are some comments around mistakes and weaknesses, and what if my brand fails? This is really interesting, Cheryl, around navigating new cultures. Spot on. That can be very challenging, especially until you find your footing in a new country. That can always be very, very daunting. I'm still navigating my way through Spanish culture, trying to get used to it. But coming back to your question around social media, I mean, it'll be interesting, I think, to hear from the HR community on what they think around, let's say, LinkedIn as a tool, and whether that is something that's a must. I'm a communicator, so of course I'm going to say, yes, you must be on social media. Social media is your online page. It is who you are, who you want to be. And I think, unlike real world and social media, you can actually have a very clear strategy. You can have and it's like an editorial, basically. You can post what you want, you can edit how you want, you can engage whether you want to or not. It's a very different interaction, I guess, mechanism. But it is around uniqueness, because not everyone is the same, even on social media, right? We are all very, very different. We all bring something different. And I love following different people and reading a lot. In fact, I get most of my news, for example, from LinkedIn and from social media channels. And again, coming back to pop culture and staying up to date. Yeah. Eva, that's very valid. You need to create clarity. Everything needs to start with clarity, right? And if you don't have clarity, action creates clarity. So, start, and then you kind of fine tune along the way as well. That's very, very valid. And the interesting thing about social media is that, for example, you follow people who are thought leaders in a specific area. So I follow hundreds of people and read their thoughts and genuinely interested in what they have to say on various topics, things I don't know about, things I know about, and so on. And I think as you look at your personal brand, we'll come back to this felt experience. It would be really good to do kind of a bit of a self-audit, let's say. Speak to people who you're surrounded with, whether it's, in your immediate area of influence or beyond, and understand what is the felt experience of dealing with you, working with you, interacting with you? Do people feel like they've just been in a storm, or do you, project this also a sense of calm? And how, or maybe it's something in the middle, or maybe it's neither. This is always, I think, quite useful. Of course, this will vary on various depending on situations, depending on what type of experiences you're faced with, whether it's a stressful one, whether it's so on. I think, just in the interest of time, one thing I wanted to touch on is the fact that your brand does not just live within you. Your brand is the projection of you. And into today's world, we've got the digital and the analog version of you and your brand. And this is very daunting and scary to some people, but at the same time, there are ways to navigate that. And, I do this for a living. I basically work with executives and create their entire, take their personalities and create their entire online persona. And we know for a fact that things that go into the internet live there forever, and there's very little that you can control in that space. So controlling it rather than letting it go into the ether is a much better strategy to have. So you want to be in control of your brand identity online. And not being online also speaks about you and says things about you as well. So I know you said there are some executives who don't want to be online. I appreciate that as well. But some people might have a bias against that, for example. So you need to navigate that space as well. When we talk about being online, there's a thing called we call the digital footprint, or the footprint. And the digital footprint is essentially, what comes up when you Google yourself. And this is something that we do on a regular basis with both ourselves. So I'll do it for me, for my personal brand. And then also we'll do it for our executives on a regular basis. So I will on average do it maybe once every month or once every quarter, depending on, the level of interest, let's say, of that person. But we do this really interesting thing on personal brand, whether it's digital or analog, called the 360 audit, where you look at the person, you do a survey with them. We can share with you the action plans and a few exercises to do, print out or do it digitally, and just fill in, your values and what you stand for and what are you passionate about and other things, to just build that personal, let's say, statement around who you are, and then everything stems from there. What do you stand for? Where do you want to go to from here? What is your 5-year action plan? What's your 10-year action plan? I know some of this sounds quite scary, but it's a great backbone to actually plan your footprint and where you take it from there. So this 360 audit starts with essentially this exercise. And then what we do is we look at what we call the white spaces. The white spaces are ideally 3 key areas where we think our leaders or we can play and have permissibility to what we say, a permission to play. So basically it is around 3 things. What are you a subject matter expert in? What is it a truly the inside out? So if you look at the T, how deep does your T go? The second one is, what is the value that you bring to your audience in terms of whether it's information, whether it's entertainment, or whether it's education? And then the third piece is, what are you truly passionate about? That doesn't have to be related to work. My boss, for example, is really passionate about reading. He reads a book a week. It's really inspiring. And he wants to share that passion with his audience. And that's fantastic, because through that, he provides information, education, and entertainment. And it's kind of all in one. There are people who are passionate about sustainability, so they can play in that area. And essentially, when you define your 3 white spaces, this is then what you focus your content on, and that becomes authentic to you. And then every time you want to post something, you just go back to your checklist and you kind of check, and see, does this relate to me? Is this true to me? Is this authentic to me? Or am I just trying to be somebody who I'm not? And sorry, Carol, I took your example, but this is kind of your personal catalog. I'd say LinkedIn is your personal catalog. This is who you are. This is what you do. This is what you're passionate about. And LinkedIn has gone long from, you know, I'm on LinkedIn because I'm looking for a job, to I'm on LinkedIn because I want to build a personal brand and I want people to know what I'm passionate about. And I want to talk about things and learn about things and share things. And so it's kind of becoming like a professional Facebook versus just a job hunting place, I think.
And thanks for bringing this. I love the audit part, because I think it could be a step in between when we don't have full clarity. What happens, I think, in the career transition phase is sometimes we're not sure what's the next step. You know, should I go into a brand new industry? Should I really put out myself out there in a specific area where I'm not sure if it's really the next step forward? And I love what you mentioned about white spaces and talking about the value that we bring others. We did a really interesting session with the senior female leadership of a large international pharma company. And we did this 360 audit exercise partially with one of them, with the group, but one of them who is such a high achiever. She's the country manager of a product, a healthcare product of them. She didn't know what value she brought because she never did that audit. And in this session, I remember as we go around in a circle with her colleagues, and her colleagues were saying about all the positive things she brings, whether personal or also in terms of her larger mission. And there were tears in that session. And I think this is a good place to start, because sometimes it can be our blind spot. So thanks for sharing my LinkedIn, because I, for one, struggle with what to put in that back screen behind me. My colleague here, Britta, has these wonderful messages that she shared, but I can't really put myself there, but I will get your help after this to figure out what is that image that is on this LinkedIn page that I've been thinking now for years, and I still can't say, okay, I should, you know, add a meaningful message there, perhaps.
Yeah, and
may I also add to that? So I just I'm thank you so much, Mary Mother. So valuable, you know, tips, and also your thought process, etc. So I'm really enjoying this a lot. I also just realized that I think sometimes we have to differentiate, you know, there's something of us we don't want to put out there, and then there are other things we want to put out there. So one may decide, you know, professionally, I'm all there, you know, out there, and, you know, promote brands, my product, my services, but as a private person, I don't want that. So we even have a corporate partner and a client of ours at And Ahead, who is a huge supporter of And Ahead and our group and our mission. And they also have their own brands, and they are all out there, but as a person, you wouldn't see her on, she's a founder, you wouldn't see her on LinkedIn, you wouldn't see her anyway. There's not even existing a photograph of her in social media, because she and her husband decided to do so. I think there's no right or wrong, but she has a clear mission with her products, and that's what she is passionate about. And there she does everything she wants. But as a person, she still wants and decided to stay private, and will do so for other reasons. And I think that's also possible. We sometimes think it's only either that or that. That's not true. So this is a good example where I also then adapted and think that's actually a good way of doing it. And although you are in the spotlight every day, because they are very successful, still to be private as a person. I really like that as well. So I just wanted to share that there's that option as well.
Yeah, it's absolutely. I will always tell you, as a communications professional, that everybody should be out in media, and everybody should have a social media platform, and everybody's a part, like an ambassador of a company, and should be out there. the fact is that there are many successful companies where, you know, the leaders just don't see value in that, in ways that, because they're quite private, or, you know, it doesn't match their personal values, and that's absolutely fine. And especially I think in the startup world, we're seeing quite a bit of that.
I think every decision has its effects, and I think we need to make peace with that, right? So if we are in a career relaunch and we decide to stay offline, then, you know, there's the effects of that, meaning that we should not expect that opportunities come knocking, because that's the best part to leverage on social media. But if we decide to put ourselves out there, then we can also think about who do we want to read what we write, what we also share, and have then the opportunity of someone also coming to us proactively for collaborations, for career opportunities, for mentoring, etc. So I think it's something that we as an individual have to make a decision on.
Oh, spot on. And Nathan Morris had this amazing quote that says, "Edit your life frequently and ruthlessly." And I like to say, edit your brand frequently and ruthlessly. It's your masterpiece, because essentially what you said, Rita, about not being on social media, you can be on social media and then decide not to be, or you can not be and then decide one day to be. And, you know, it's also fine. It's part of your brand mix, just like brands dip in and out. You know, you can do the same with your brand. And I think that's also partially what makes it magical and what makes it interesting. It's a living, breathing organism, right? Interesting question, Barbara, around consistency. It depends what you're trying to do in different stages of your life, right? If, you know, I'll give you an example of my husband. He was in the corporate world, he was online, and then he ended up going and running his own business. And during that time, he felt he did not need to invest in this at all. Now he's back into a different branch, and now he feels like he has to reactivate it because it works for him at this point in his life. So it all depends, I think, where you are and what industry you're in and what you're trying to achieve. Remember, we're coming back to the goals and what you're trying to get out of it.
Absolutely. Okay.
I know we're almost out of time, so that's kind of it from me. I do have these exercises on the PowerPoint, which I'll share with the group, and I think you will circuit them, right?
Absolutely. And we also have sessions throughout the year. I won't share them now because I want to leave a bit of time for any final questions. But you received the email with the presentation as well as the recording that will go out also to a few thousand people who are members to the community, to get your insights, your advice, and some of the tools that we will share. So really appreciate having you today, Marima. Really such a luxury as well, because we know you do this for senior executives, and sharing, also hearing your authentic voice and also your story and what meaning you put behind it it's been such a valuable session for us. So really thank you. If anyone feels that they want to ask questions, I'm going to stop the recording so that you can feel free to ask, and it's not recorded, so that you can ask a bit more personal questions.